if you're using imagery to tell stories, even if you go to a stock photo library and it's a human that was photographed, it's not the human that was in that
Right.
story. And if it can bring that story to life and help you remember it, 400 times more likely to remember it later, then that's where I think the power of this AI is so good in storytelling.
I know from talking to some of the people that I go to church with, one of their fears is that, you know what, if we let AI in the church, the pastor is just going to go to ChatGPT and he's going to go online and he's going to buy a sermon.
AI is not just a command or a query, but it's a conversation. I think the downside of this is that some pastors are going to take shortcuts and not bring enough of themselves, not do enough conversation. One of the first speaking engagements I did around AI was the Indiana Wesleyan University brought me in to talk to their faculty about AI and what it is and you know all that. And they told me they had 12 papers in one class turned in, and 6 of them started with, "I am a large language model and cannot ... and then it wrote the rest of the paper. My own experience, I am a traditional artist. Before I went to art school, I can draw fairly photorealistic and paint and things like that. And I was scared to death of Photoshop because I thought I'm going to lose all my skills. So I made this little piece, and of course it got a bunch of hate on YouTube, great slop, and you can't use AI to destroy Back to the Future and all that kind of stuff.
Hi, and welcome to the 91 Day AI Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Mast, and I am really excited today. Jason and I have just recently actually met online, and Jason has written an amazing book. And I'm really excited to chat about that today because this is one of those topics that tends to get people's interest and sometimes even a little bit of angst or anger on their way. And we're going to talk about AI and the church. So Jason, before I blow everything, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's start with what inspired you to write AI in the church at this particular moment?
Well, Jonathan, first, thank you for the invite. I am such a huge fan of you and what you're doing, and I'm just thrilled to have a chance to talk to you today.
Well, thank you.
What led me to write the book is that I always admit to folks that I'm a bit of a geek. I have been in love with AI since I first saw R2-D2 and C-3PO walking in the desert. And I grew up on shows like Knight Rider and, you know, all those kinds of things. And it's like we're actually in the place where some of that stuff is becoming a reality. I also, in about 1997, I was in art school and I was hired as an intern at a large church in Ohio, a kind of a mega church at the time. And my role at that church was to help them with media stuff, screens, technology, and all of that. So I have had an interest for a couple of decades, almost 3 now, in using technology to communicate the message of the church through the latest and greatest technology. And like many people, I think I was, when ChatGPT came around, actually for me, the first kind of aha moment, scary in a sense because I'm a graphic artist, was when DALL-E 2 released the outpainting feature. And you could put a picture in and draw, you know this, but draw a box next to it, describe what you wanted to see. I put Mona Lisa in and was able to create a whole scene around Mona Lisa that all looked like it was painted by Da Vinci, and my mouth dropped open and I started to sweat and my heart started to beat a little faster because I thought, did I just witness my extinction? Nobody's going to need me as a graphic artist anymore. But then I got really excited about what this could mean for the church, because a lot of churches cannot afford to hire somebody like me to communicate their message. And so I just sort of embraced the tools. I thought, I want to learn as much about this as I can and then help others to kind of walk through this door as well, because it's probably the most consequential technology that has come on the scene since the printing press. When Gutenberg invented the printing press, it changed everything, and especially in the church. And so I'm trying to help people navigate this moment in time.
Well, I love it. And I think, let's set the stage a little bit for those people. And where is this going to go? Well, you're going to talk to some guys here that are big proponents of AI in the church. And if that makes us, if you want to run, let me encourage you to stick around and listen, because I think we've got some pretty good reasons why we think it makes sense. But if you also think that AI is going to replace your pastor, I don't think Jason and I are probably going to agree with you on, or at least not that it should. So we're going to talk to you about some different things there. As we dive in, Jason, you and I were talking pre-show a little bit about AI being a tool. And let's start there before we dive into where it fits into the church. My belief, very simply, is that AI amplifies skill and experience, and it's a tool. The analogy I often use is a roofer. I've never been a roofer, but when I grew up, I'm 55. When I grew up and I saw roofing crews around, they had ladders up against houses, and they'd grab those big packs of shingles, those asphalt shingles, and they'd carry them up on their shoulders, and they'd bring boxes of nails, and they'd bring their hammers up, and they'd start nailing them on that roof. And it often took days for them to do a roof. Well, just recently, one of my neighbors had a new roof put on their house across the street, and in 2 days, and this was a big house, not that it was mine, but that happened to just to style, huge roof. In 2 days, they not only ripped the entire roof off, but replaced everything, because instead of carrying the shingles up, they had the shingles literally set up by a boom lift on the roof. And instead of having hammers and nails, they had hammers and nails, but they were power hammers with air things. And they literally went pop, 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 pop. And they were doing shingles so incredibly fast. And I thought to myself, this is exactly what AI is like for us now. It allows us to do things so much faster. But yet, in the same way, I'm not a roofer. So if you'd put me on that roof with those asphalt shingles and that hammer, I would have made an absolute mess of things, because I don't know what I'm doing as a roofer. And I really think AI is similar to that. So that's kind of my perspective. I'd love yours, Jason. How do you think AI fits as not in the church, but just as a tool? Where does that fit in? Do you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on that analogy?
Yeah, I love the analogy. The one that I write about in the book is that I use the metaphor of an axe. An axe is an excellent tool for chopping down a tree and cutting up firewood and all that. And you could probably use a stone or a large blunt object of some sort to knock down a tree, but it's going to take a lot longer. It's not going to be as clean, all those things. But here's the thing. You have to learn how to wield an axe, or you might chop off your foot or smack yourself in the face or throw out your back. And then there's always the argument that AI is evil, or there's this tool. It's a tool that can cause harm. Well, there are people who will swing an axe into someone else. There are axe murderers out there. So we shouldn't ban axes, but we should be proponents of learning how to wield these tools in a way that is efficient and that allows us to really take advantage of all of the wonderful things they can do. So I see it as a neutral tool. It's neither inherently good nor inherently evil, but the people who are wielding it might have not so good intentions or really good intentions. And so what I have been a proponent of in the church world is helping people recognize that there are a lot of people out there that don't even know these tools exist, or they don't understand what they are. So we have to help people discern, because we both know this. You can no longer say seeing is believing, because I can help you see anything. And now I can make it video, and I can use your voice and, all those kinds of things. So I think that we have a responsibility as those the arbiters of AI, those of us who know how to use it. And this is why I'm such a big fan of yours, to help people understand what these tools are and what they can do, so we can recognize those things that might be harmful, but also good.
I love I love the way I agree with you. I think, like an axe, AI is a neutral device. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but it needs to be used responsibly. And I think that fits in across the board. As we move into church, I want to share something that the church we've been going to, I mentioned we just moved. And so we've been visiting some different churches and trying to find a church home where we've moved to. And one of the churches we've gone to has done something that I think is really cool. Keep in mind, I'm the ADD guy and I'm very visual. but they have literally, and with full disclosure, they've been taking passages from the Bible, and when they do that, they've been using AI to create a rendition of what that may have looked like. And what's
Yeah.
been so amazing to me in that is that because I'm a visual learner, and not everybody is, but I am a visual learner. And when I get to see a photo of what, and they did this over Christmas, of what maybe it might have looked like when the shepherds were visited by the angel to tell them of Jesus' birth, I've thought of it
Yeah.
and I've got a view in my head. But to see that pop up on the big screen in front, and admittedly, as just a possibility of what it could, it was so impactful because
Yes.
it became more real. And so to me, and there's a lot more I know we're going to talk about, but to me, that's just one example of how AI can be used responsibly to
Yep.
add value, to increase the intensity of that worship, and to candidly allow me as a human to think even more about the magnitude and the magnificence of that particular event.
Yeah.
Let's dive in and talk a little bit about, if I'm in a church, how do I begin? Because again, we do know there are people in the church that are going to go, no, AI is
Oh, yeah.
evil. We can't go there. We've kind of
Yep.
dealt with that. It's neutral. But how do we begin if we're in the church, whether we're in ministry or whether we're a pastor or maybe just a layperson in the church? How do we responsibly and effectively start using AI within the church?
Yeah.
So that, and you said this pre-call, I love this, so that we avoid that spot in the movie WALL-E where, the humans are being taken care of by robots and become so dependent on them that they literally become useless. We all
Yeah.
know that there's going to be a pastor somewhere that's going to decide to let ChatGPT write all their sermons, and it's going to have bad results.
Right.
Whether we agree or not, we can't do anything about that. But I think we can help teach people how to do it responsibly. So step one, you're in the church, you're involved in the church. How do we begin integrating AI into that? What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's about learning how to talk to chatbots and learn the technology. I mean, I've had so many people say to me, I tried it. I wasn't very impressed with what it came up with, or some people are really scared of what it came up with because it was better than they thought it could be. And we have to learn how to talk to, even though natural language processing allows us to talk to it in a very human sort of way, I think people are still treating it like you have to learn C++ or BASIC or something like that.
Yes.
And they're talking to it in a very technical way, or they don't give it enough information to be successful. So if I just say, write me a sermon, it'll do that, but it's going to be a pretty terrible sermon because it doesn't have enough context. It doesn't understand the role you want it to play, the task that you're after, your desired outcome, any of those things. It doesn't have any real idea how to make that successful. Before I jump a little further into that, is it okay for me to show an image on the screen here?
Yeah,
through
absolutely.
eCam?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to share this because you just talked about it, but I'm a big proponent of image in worship. I love when I am at a church that has screens and things. And there's actually a really valuable statistic and study that was done back in 2008 that found that we are 65% visual learners as a culture, and that learning increases by 400% when you use image to teach, which is pretty staggering
Wow.
if you ask me. Yeah, and what's really
Absolutely.
cool is that with AI, as you know, just as you were describing at your Christmas service, you can bring those stories to life. So here's something I share when I'm teaching on this. I was working with a pastor in California, actually a bishop of the United Methodist Church, and she wanted to tell the story of Elijah in the desert. And she said to me, I really want this to be a story. I don't want people to just watch each word on the screen as I say it, and then they're sort of removed from the story. So I went to Midjourney. The story begins with Elijah, and he's in the desert, and there's this dry wadi, which is this body of water. And so used Midjourney to create this image. And then Elijah prays to God that God would supply water. And so I just changed the prompt a little bit. And there's the water now. And then God sends food in the form of ravens. And so I was able to reprompt the image, and now there are ravens up there. In fact, there's even a close-up of ravens in the desert, which is not a stock photo, but an AI creation. And at the end of the story, Yeah, and then at the end of the story, the wadi dries up. And so what was really cool about this was that I watched people lean in and experience this story in a whole other way. And then there's just one other thing I wanted to show you real quick, because I worked with a pastor who was preaching from Jeremiah. And in Jeremiah, there's this story where Jeremiah is looking for a word from the Lord, it says, and he goes to the potter's house, and there's a potter crafting something at a wheel, and the potter is shaping that, and it becomes marred and misshapen, and the potter doesn't take the clay and throw it away, but takes that clay and forms it into something new, and then the word of the Lord comes to Jeremiah that we are like clay in the hands of the potter. And so the pastor was telling me in planning this service, he said, I have a story like this from my childhood where I went to a Native American reservation, and I was 13. I didn't really want to go. I thought this is sort of silly. And that's where my parents chose to do vacation. And he said, something happened that just has stuck with me for all these years. It was actually pretty cool. This Native American man came out, full regalia, takes a lump of clay, sets it on a wheel, begins to pump it with his foot, and pumped it so fast that the clay wobbled and fell onto the ground. And in a couple pieces, he picked it up. There were bits of dirt and grass and pebbles and things in it, but he puts it back on the wheel, and he crafted something, and it was just breathtaking. And we all sat there completely quiet. And I said, that's a great story. Do you have an image that, do you have any photos from that vacation? And he said, Jason, it was the 80s. We didn't carry around cameras or anything. I was 13.
Yeah.
I said, well, do you mind if I use AI to create an image for that? And he's like, no, go ahead. That's fine. And so I created this image in Midjourney. And
Wow.
you could see that people, and I even prompted it to sort of take on the look of an old Polaroid, Instamatic camera. So it's got that kind of sepia tone sort of look about it and all of that. And you could see people in the room just sort of lean in that moment. Now, he didn't say we used AI to create this image, but I tell people all the time, if you're using imagery to tell stories, even if you go to a stock photo library and it's a human that was photographed, it's not the human that was in that story. Right. And if it can bring that story to life and help you remember it, 400 times more likely to remember it later, then that's where I think the power of this AI is so good in storytelling. And that works in the church, but also works in business. If you're trying to help people understand who you are and what you're about and your product and your service or whatever, images can help us do that in powerful ways.
No, and I love the stuff that you shared there. I think that was so cool, and that stat is unbelievable of the value that imagery brings when you're teaching. I mean, I absolutely love that. Well, let's take a little spin. We talked about some positive and some fun ways to do it. I know from talking to some of the people that I go to church with, one of their fears is that, if we let AI in the church, the pastor is just going to go to ChatGPT and he's going to go online and he's going to buy a sermon and he's going to then upload it into ChatGPT and he's going to go ahead and, have ChatGPT rewrite it. Now, my response generally isn't about AI at that point in time. It's generally like, maybe we have a trust issue with the pastor here or something that's going on, but let's assume that's not the issue. How do you address that fear when people go, you and I both know there are repositories, and maybe they don't know this, but there are tons of repositories of sermons that pastors can get access to, that you and I can get access to. I mean, we could Google or go to Perplexity and probably have one in 20 seconds. Yeah. What stops and how does that parishioner or that congregant, how do they not freak out about the fact that, now my pastor is just going to go ahead and drink coffee all day long and he's going to buy a sermon and have AI rewrite it? How do you address that fear when you hear that come up?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a valid fear that we would take sort of the shortcut and not do the work of wrestling with the text and all of that. So I had this moment when I was younger where I lived a few blocks from the church that I grew up attending. And I used to like to, in the summer, walk down every once in a while and I'd visit with the church secretary or whatever. And one day she asked me to put some mail on the pastor's desk. And on his desk was a book that I had never seen before, but it was called 1001 Illustrations for Preaching. I was like, what is this? and I opened it up, and one of the stories that I found in there was a story that the pastor had told, and I thought, wait a minute, I thought that was his story and his, whatever. And I discovered that, it was something that now, in that case, I thought I've remembered that story for a very long time. And it helped me to remember the crux, the main idea of what he was talking about. So, I think if we're using it to enhance what we're saying, if we're using it for illustrations and things like that, or to help better understand the context of, a story that we're telling and what was happening and all that, I don't think we're crossing a line. I kind of have three guiding principles that I write about in the book, and I encourage pastors, church leaders, and heck, people who are not in the church as well, to figure out what their guiding principles are for the way they use AI. But my three guiding principles are, generally speaking, AI should be a do it with you, not a do it for you. Now, there are caveats to that rule. There are certain things AI can do for you, but as a general rule, we ought to be doing the driving. The second one, and again, just in the time that I have been following your work, I have resonated with it so much, because I think this next one I just see you talking about all the time. But AI is not just a command or a query, but it's a conversation. And when you collaborate with a chatbot, and you're back and forth, and you're helping it understand context and task and role, and there's all sorts of different things I write about in the book. You get better outputs because you're collaborating. It's a conversation, not just a command or a query. A command or a query is, can you write me a sermon? Of course, it's going to say yes, or write me a sermon. Then the last one, and again, I think this applies to in the church, but I also think it applies to people outside the church, is that you have a soul. AI does not. And if you don't bring enough of your soul to the conversation, you're going to get soulless outputs from the conversation.
I love that.
So you really have to infuse a lot of you and what you believe and who you are, and your business philosophy or whatever. It needs to understand you in order to partner with you to create something that's really good. So I think the downside of this is that some pastors are going to take shortcuts and not bring enough of themselves, not do enough conversation, really ask it to do it for them. And if you do that, then you do end up with things. AI has no life experience. I mean, it has certainly read about what life experience is, but the algorithms and the data that's trained in is not the human experience. It can understand people describing their human experience, but it can't have that human experience. And that's key, I think, for us in the church or in the world to communicate our message in a compelling way.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you do that. And I really like the point one that you made. I think that was also super, super relevant as we take a look at this. Like you, I suppose I have a perspective on people that I trust people are going to generally do the right thing when given the choice. And I think AI is just an amazing tool to allow them to do that. The other thing that I want to talk about that I hear all the time, and you probably do as well, is, AI is going to take away, it's going to kill all our creativity. It's just going to go out the window. I actually believe just the opposite personally, and I'm basing it on my own personal life. I'm an amateur photographer. I've never really played as a graphic artist or anything like that, and I don't pretend that I am one. But I have more fun now, literally just enjoyment out of creating images with AI that make me smile. Not even ones that I necessarily use, although I certainly use a lot of them in what I'm doing. And I believe it's made me more creative, not less so. I'd like to hear your perspective on that, because again, there are lots of voices out there saying, we're going to kill all creativity if we let AI in the door anywhere in life, let alone at the church. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you stand?
Yeah, well, let me pick back up on one thing you said, and then go into that.
Sure.
You said generally, I assume that people are going to use it with the best intentions. I'll just mention that one of the first speaking engagements I did around AI was the Indiana Wesleyan University brought me in to talk to their faculty about AI and what it is and all that. And I went to dinner with some of the professors the night before I was doing this engagement with them. And they told me they had 12 papers in one class turned in, and 6 of them started with, "I am a large language model and cannot ... and then it wrote the rest of the paper. And they didn't even take the time to read it to get rid of the evidence that ChatGPT wrote it for them. So that's not an AI problem, though, in my mind. That's an integrity problem.
Exactly.
That I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to solve that. I wrote about that in the book. There's a history of us being fearful of what technology is going to do to creativity and art. Cameras were invented in the late 1800s, and at first there was a lot of ambivalence about cameras, that they were going to stop artists from creating, because back before cameras, you had to draw it or paint it or sculpt it or whatever. And they said they're a machine and they are going to end creativity. And of course they didn't. And it wasn't until the 1920s that photography was considered an art, which is kind of interesting. My own experience, I am a traditional artist. Before I went to art school, I can draw fairly photorealistic and paint and things like that. And I was scared to death of Photoshop because I thought I'm going to lose all my skills. And then I recognized after learning the tool that Photoshop is just a more sophisticated paintbrush. And I see AI in the same way. It just allows me to do things that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So one of the skill sets I have not had time to develop in my career is 3D animation, but I have done a lot of things since Runway ML and Sora that I've explored a little bit, Kling AI. I've been able to create some things that are pretty incredible that I don't have the skill set for, but I can go to AI with my vision for. I want to create. I created a little spoof. Maybe I'll send this to you afterwards. But on the Transformers cartoon, I thought, what if there was a Chinese knockoff toy called Transmorphers, and they had a cartoon? So I used Suno to create a theme song for it, which sounds a lot sort of like the Transformers song. And then I used Midjourney to generate a bunch of images. And then this was before we had this generation of AI video tools, which are much better than the first generation, but it's still pretty amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, just like you said, having fun with it. I was able to put together this little Transformers intro, and of course it was controversial when I put it on YouTube. I had so many people like, AI is awful. And in fact, I did something over Christmas. I think I might have even showed this to you, but with Back to the Future, and I thought it'd be fun to look at what would it look like if it was a Rankin and Bass Christmas special. So I made this little piece, and of course, it got a bunch of hate on YouTube. Great slop, and you can't use AI to destroy Back to the Future and all that kind of stuff. And
it brings out emotions in people, doesn't it? It's really amazing.
It sure does. So, for me, again, it's just the next evolution of tools. And if you learn how to use it properly and you learn how to talk to it, you'll be able to create incredible things. So I'm still a proponent.
I love it. So, one of the things I love to ask, and by the way, just as a prep, I did not tell you this up front. In our pre-call, you showed me your teaser. In a minute here, I don't know if you have to prep for it. I would love to have you show that here as an example of really amazing AI. By the way, Jason, we mentioned if you're joining us late, Jason wrote an amazing book called AI in the Church, and this teaser is amazing. We'll show it in a moment. But before we go to the teaser, question for you. We call this the 91-Day AI Transformation Podcast because I've found that when people start integrating AI, whether it's in their lives, in their business, in their church, they tend to fall in one to two categories. Either, as we've talked about, stay away, I don't want anything to do with AI, and they're going to stick their head in the sand. Or on the other hand, they're that quintessential, maybe me, ADD guy that's like, oh, let's do it all, and let's do it all right now. And neither of those at the end of the day are a very effective way to bring a new technology into your life, into your business, into your church. They don't work well. If you were talking to any pastor that's out there right now, or any church leader that's out there, or a office manager in the church, whatever that may be, and they said, all right, Jason, we know that we probably need to do this over a step-by-step process. What might you recommend? And by the way, guys, I did not prep Jason on this, so this is going to be, and there's no right or wrong answer, but what would you recommend over the first 91 days or 3 months? What types of things should they be looking at as far as starting and beginning to bring AI into the church? Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, well, I think that ChatGPT plus, or I'm more of a fan of ChatGPT or Claude. Those are kind of my two favorite platforms. I find that Claude tends to write a little more human than the others. I'm not a big fan of Gemini personally. I've just found that it's often too opinionated. Yeah, it's too opinionated and it's very inconsistent. I have found anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But just getting started, one other little thing I write about in the book is that when I was a little kid, my dad took me on a roller coaster and it scared me to death. I was maybe too young to get on a roller coaster. And I spent the next 15 years not ever going on a roller coaster again because I was so scared of that first time. And then somebody finally convinced me, you need to try this. And I got on a roller coaster and I loved it so much that day before I left the park, I rode every one of them. And then the next year I went to 7 theme parks all over the country because I wanted to catch up on roller coasters. I think too many people have maybe had one bad experience with ChatGPT, or maybe they've just seen from the queue line how scary this AI technology can be and they've never even tried it. So first of all, I always encourage people just to get started, but to use ChatGPT. And the thing about the technology that is so incredible is that it will actually help you learn to use it. You can ask it to help you. What do I need to ask you? How do I talk to you? What do you need from me to be successful? And it will walk you through the things. It will give you clarifying questions. So
yes,
I would encourage churches to maybe think about using it to plan a series or an event or help you write a Bible study or do something where, again, you are the decider. So you don't just take its outputs and use them as they are, but to perfect them and craft them and make sure they line up with your theology and all that kind of thing. So that might be a first start. One of the things I actually demonstrate in the book, but also I do seminars on this all over the country, is I show them the process of designing a series and then doing the branding for it using tools like Ideogram or Midjourney. And so it will help you write prompts if you're trying to describe. You can use DALL-E within ChatGPT. It's not my favorite image generator. It tends to be a little more... It kind of has it has an AI look about it. Midjourney is so good at creating organic stock photography type stuff that you almost can't tell. And sometimes you can't. Ideogram is one of my favorite tools for design. Like it understands design in a way, like I will use it sometimes as first drafts for logos and things. And then I'll do some tweaking and all of that. But anyway, trying to combine some of the tools. One other tool that I am just a huge fan of, I know you have used this tool as well, is 11 Labs. 11 Labs is great if you want to create a little, like that, the Elijah video or slides that I showed you earlier. If you wanted to make that into a video and have someone narrate it in a really compelling way, I'm a fan of what 11 Labs can do when you give it a script, but it has a voice-to-voice feature that is unbelievable, where you can speak it and speak it with all the emotion, and you can get quiet and you can bring energy and then apply the voice after the fact. I've even done things where I've a female voice would be more appropriate for whatever I was doing, and I've been able to change my voice and use it. In fact, the video we're going to show you, the little trailer, I actually spoke every line in that trailer, but used 11 Labs to fix it up. So.
Oh, that's
so.
Cool.
I guess I would.
I've seen that, so I know that. I didn't know you could do that. I love 11 Labs, but I haven't played with it enough to know that you could actually do that. So you're saying I could actually go and narrate, but then change my voice in. Oh wow, how cool is that?
Absolutely. Now, and what I always found that in the pre voice to voice days, I would get something and it would kind of sound a little bit robotic, or it would sound, it just, and I'd have to re-roll 4 or 5 times, and I'd cut together the best lines and all of that to get something that really sounded human. But now there's this ability that all you have to do is read it, and you can read it and you can get really quiet if you want to, and then you can get louder and you can have all the emotion that you want, and then use some deep voice or some movie trailer voice or a child or whatever. So yeah, the clip that I showed you prior to this, I did every voice in it, but used 11 Labs to transform that.
Well, what's a great segue. So this is a great example. Again, Jason wrote an amazing book. I want to encourage you guys, if you're interested about AI in the church or just interested in AI, pick up a copy of it, check it out. I've been super impressed with what I've seen. But I want to show the trailer here, not just to promote the book, but mainly because Jason used AI to do this. And it is, candidly, it's really, really cool. So I'm going to try to hide myself so that we can show this full screen, and I'm going to see if that works. We're on a new platform on Riverside, so I'm not as familiar. Let me see if I can go away. Give me just a second to do that, and then let's play that if you would, Jason.
All right. You ready for me to run it now then?
I think I need to hide myself. There we go.
All right. I'm going to run it. Here we go.
We asked the greatest church leaders of all time what they thought of Jason Moore's new book, AI in the Church, a clear guide for the curious and courageous. Here's what they had to say.
My heart was strangely warmed when I read AI in the Church. Yours will be also.
Preach the gospel, and whenever necessary, use AI in the church to help.
Trust in God, but read AI in the church. Could this be the next great awakening?
I protest you not picking up your own copy.
I was predestined to love this book, and you are too.
Heaven hope the preacher who ignores AI in the church.
So there it is.
That was fabulous. I love it. I love it. It's just a great, what's so fun is showing how AI can work effectively. And I think that's just an amazing example of that. And a good smile came to my face as well while I was reading that. So I love that you bring a little bit of levity in as well as we do that. Sometimes in the church, I think we take ourselves just a bit too seriously. So I love that. That was fantastic.
Well, and you said earlier just how much fun you can have with it. And I had this idea in my head. I thought, what can I do to help people kind of connect with this book? And I thought it'd be kind of fun. One of the things I actually talk about in the book is that there's a scripture that talks about the great cloud of witnesses that have come before us. Mm-hmm. And I said, one of the really wonderful things about using ChatGPT is, in a sense, you get to collaborate with the great cloud of witnesses, because it's got all of Wesley's writings, and it understands the Calvinist perspective, and it understands Spurgeon and, all that. So when I'm developing something, I can say, what would John Wesley say about this? Or what would, and so you can kind of use it to bring about the knowledge of all of the decades and all of the people that you might admire and all of that to your own work. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to see what leaders throughout time might say about a book about AI. And I wrote most of those lines, but there were a couple of them I'm like, I don't really know, what would I do? And I went to ChatGPT and I said, I would love for you to help me come up with, I think Moody was one of them. I'm like, what might Dwight L. Moody say about a book about AI? And so it gave me the germs that I was able to kind of turn into something. And if people are interested in the book, I do have a website set up for it. It's AIinthechurch.ai, which is probably the easiest way. If you want to order it, you just click. It's going to take you to Amazon, but if you want to learn more, that's a way to do it.
Yeah, we'll put a link down in the show notes as well, so that we've got that in there. And question, Jason, if people want to reach out in addition to the book, if people want to reach out, want to connect, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. I'm going to actually just give my email address, jason@midnightoilproductions.com, if you'd like to learn more. I will say, if you are someone in the church, you're a leader, a pastor, and you're trying to figure all this out, I do lead a 6-month cohort process where you'll be paired up with 10 churches from all over the country. And basically, we do 6 months of 1-hour conversations where we tackle a different topic every month, from chat bots to image generation to video. How do we design series, all that kind of thing. I also do one-on-one hour-long sessions with everybody in the cohort, so we can talk about anything you're interested in. And you get a couple copies of the book. And then I also bring in other experts. We have about 3 or 4 evening sessions where I'll bring in somebody that will teach you about automation. I have a friend that works at Microsoft in quantum computing and AI. She helps the government write policy around AI, and she does a wonderful ethics conversation about, where do we not cross lines and all those kind of things. So if you're looking for help on how to do that, I would love to help you figure out how do we incorporate this technology into our work in the church.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, Jason, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out to me online, and we had the opportunity to connect. I definitely have a feeling we'll be chatting more as things go along. And I want to thank you for our listeners. If you're listening or if you're watching on the video, thank you for joining us here on the 91 Day AI Transformation Podcast. We love your feedback. If you haven't already, please like the podcast, give us a thumbs up, give us a review if you would. And if you've got guests that you'd like us to interview, or somebody that maybe you ran across and said, wow, this would be great, please let us know, because that's how we meet amazing people like Jason. So with that, make it a great day, everybody, and we'll see you on the other side. Bye, everyone.